53 lights glowed blue across the dark lecture hall. 53 students sat perfectly still as information poured directly into their minds. Maps of distant stars, gravity calculations, navigation routes through asteroid fields. All of it downloaded in seconds. In the back row, Nira Okonkwo sat with a blank screen. Her datapad showed nothing. No downloads, no glowing lines, just darkness reflecting her own face back at her. The 17-year-old human from Lagos Colony was the only student in the room whose mind remained untouched by the data stream. Professor Call floated at the front of the class. The Vorten was made of living crystal, 6 centuries old, and spoke in sound that felt like music. Today, that music carried disappointment. The navigation exam will begin now, Professor Call announced. You have all received the star charts for the Broken Reef sector. Plot the safest course through the debris field. Around Nira, students began working instantly. Their hands moved across holographic displays, drawing perfect routes based on the data now living inside their heads. The Silkari boy to her left finished in 40 seconds. The Greth twins behind her completed theirs in under a minute. Nira stared at the question. She had not received any star charts. Human brains could not accept neural downloads. Her biology simply refused them. She tried to remember what she had read about the Broken Reef in the Academy Library last night. The old books said the debris field shifted constantly. She closed her eyes and pictured the way dust moved in sunlight back home. Patterns within patterns. She drew a route based on feeling. When Professor Call collected the results, the crystalline being paused at Nira's station. The harmonic voice dropped low. This route would destroy any ship within minutes. I did my best, Nira said quietly. Your best is insufficient. Professor Call turned to address the entire class. This is why the Academy Council debated human admission for 300 years. Some minds are simply not equipped for higher learning. Laughter rippled through the room. Not cruel laughter, exactly. More like the sound of pity. Nira packed her empty datapad and left before the lecture ended. Her roommate, Din, found her in their shared quarters an hour later. The Silkari had translucent skin that showed blue blood moving beneath, and 4 arms that were always busy with something. Right now, 2 hands held a food tray, while the other 2 gestured with concern. I heard what happened. Call can be harsh. Call was honest. Nira sat on her bed, holding a worn leather journal. Maybe humans don't belong here. That's not true. Din set down the tray. You just learn differently. I could share my download files with you. Help you study. It doesn't work that way for me. I have to read things. Think about them. Let them settle in my mind over time. Din's 4 arms spread in confusion. But that takes so long. How do humans accomplish anything? Nira almost smiled. Slowly, I guess. After Din left for evening downloads, Nira opened her father's journal. He had been a xenobiologist who died studying unknown organisms on a distant moon. His handwriting filled every page with observations, questions, and drawings of things he had seen. One passage was circled in red ink. Nira had read it 100 times since his death. The greatest wisdom cannot be given, her father had written. It must be grown, like a seed that needs time and struggle to become strong. The beings who download everything into their minds may know more facts than us. But do they understand what those facts mean? Do they feel the weight of knowledge? Nira closed the journal and looked out her window at the dying star that the station orbited. Its light was orange and tired, like a fire burning down to embers. Tomorrow she would fail another exam. The day after, probably another. The alien students would whisper about the slow human who couldn't keep up. But her father had believed humans carried something valuable, something that couldn't be measured by download speeds or data storage. She just had to figure out what it was in the archives deep beneath the station. Forgotten files gathered digital dust. One folder was labeled The Pattern Seekers, Extinct Species Studies. Inside were records of a civilization that had died 2 million years ago. They had been the last species to think the way humans thought. N01 had accessed that folder in 10,000 years. But soon, someone would need to. The dying star pulsed once like a heartbeat, and Nira felt something stir in her chest. A feeling she couldn't name. A lesson she hadn't learned yet. The lesson was already written somewhere. She just had to find it. The observation deck was empty at midnight. Most students were sleeping while their neural implants organized the day's downloads. Dreams meant nothing to beings who stored memories like files. Nira sat cross-legged on the cold floor, a sketchbook in her lap. Through the massive window, the dying star swirled with rivers of orange and red gas. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. Her pencil moved across the paper, tracing patterns in the stellar winds. Spirals within spirals. Rhythms that repeated at different scales. "You're here again." Din stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around themselves for warmth. The Silcari's translucent skin glowed faintly in the starlight. "Can't sleep," Nira said without looking up. "What are you drawing?" "The star. The way its gases move." Nira tilted the sketchbook. "See these patterns? They repeat every few hours. Like breathing." Din looked at the sketch, then at the star, then back at the sketch. The station sensors track all stellar activity. They would have noted any patterns. Maybe they're looking for the wrong things. Din sat beside her, joints folding in ways human bodies couldn't manage. "I don't understand how you think. My downloads tell me exactly what that star is doing. Temperature, density, radiation output. But you see something else. My father called it feeling the shape of things." Nira set down her pencil. "When I was little, he took me to watch birds migrate over Lego's colony. Thousands of them, all moving together. He asked me to predict which way they would turn. I got it right every time. Not because I calculated their flight paths. Because I felt the pattern. That sounds like superstition. Maybe." Nira smiled. "But I was never wrong." The next day brought another practical exercise. Students gathered in the simulation bay, where holographic asteroid fields filled the room like a deadly maze. "Navigate from point A to point B," Professor Call instructed. "Your downloads contain optimal routes based on 10,000 previous simulations." One by one, students entered the holographic field. One by one, they followed the same path. Left at the spinning rock, right at the ice cluster, straight through the gap between the twin boulders. Every single one passed. Then it was Nira's turn. She had no downloaded route. She had only her eyes and her instincts. The first asteroid tumbled toward her. She dodged left when the optimal route said right. Gasps came from the watching students. Professor Call's crystalline body flickered with what might have been irritation. Nira moved through the field like water around stones. Not the efficient path, not the calculated path, but a path that felt correct. She failed the exercise by 4 seconds over the time limit, but as she exited the simulation, she paused. Look back at the holographic field. There's something wrong with the third sector. Professor Call's harmonics sharpened. "Explain." "The optimal route passes right next to that dark area. But something is there. Something the sensors missed. Impossible. The simulation is based on complete sensor data. Can you scan it again? Please." For a long moment, the Vortons said nothing. Then, slowly, Professor Call activated a deep scan of the dark area. The results appeared on every screen in the room that a rogue asteroid, completely black, absorbing all scanner signals. Nearly invisible, positioned exactly where the optimal route passed closest. Every student who followed the downloaded path, Professor Call said quietly, would have been destroyed in real conditions. Silence filled the simulation bay. "How did you know?" Din whispered. Nira shook her head. "I didn't know. I felt something wrong, like a shadow in the corner of my eye." That night, Nira visited the Academy archives. She searched through ancient records until her eyes burned. Finally, she found a species called the Pattern Seekers, extinct for 2 million years. They had built great civilizations not through downloaded knowledge, but through observation and intuition. They had seen connections that pure logic missed. The records said they were the last species to think differently before humans. And then came one final note, buried in a file no one had opened in 10,000 years. The Pattern Seekers were destroyed when they failed the Watcher's test. Nira's blood went cold. What was the Watcher? And what was the test? Outside the archive window, the dying star pulsed again. Stronger this time. Like it was waking up, like it was watching. Red lights painted the walls of every corridor. The alarm had been screaming for 3 minutes straight, and nobody knew how to stop it. Nira ran through crowds of confused students. Some stood frozen, waiting for their neural implants to download emergency protocols. Others moved in perfect patterns toward assigned safety stations. All of them looked terrified. The dying star had gone wrong. Through every window, Nira could see it. The old orange light had turned violet. Energy pulses burst from its surface like waves crashing against an invisible shore. Each pulse hit the station's shields and made the floor shake. All personnel report to the central assembly hall. Admiral Sorrell's voice boomed through the speakers. The station commander was a Greth, 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor plating. He had voted against human admission to the academy and never missed a chance to remind everyone. Nira reached the assembly hall as the admiral began speaking. Thousands of students and faculty filled the space, their faces lit by holographic displays showing the star's activity. The stellar anomaly began 14 minutes ago, Admiral Sorrell announced. Energy output has increased by 400%. Our shields are holding, but we project failure within 6 hours. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emergency protocols have been downloaded to all implants. Follow them exactly. Evacuation ships are being prepared. A Vorton professor raised a crystalline hand. Admiral, these energy pulses don't match any known stellar behavior. Our downloads contain nothing that explains this. Then we adapt. The Admiral's armored face showed no emotion. We evacuate and study the phenomenon from a safe distance. Nira pushed forward through the crowd. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Admiral Sorrell. The giant Greth looked down at her like she was an insect. This is not the time for human questions. The pulses have a pattern. Silence fell across the hall. Every eye turned toward the small human girl standing before the massive station commander. What did you say? The energy bursts. They're not random. Nira's voice shook, but she kept talking. Listen to them. There's a rhythm, like a heartbeat, or a signal. Admiral Sorrell's eyes narrowed. Our sensors detect no such pattern. Your sensors are looking for mathematics. This is something else. Nira pulled out her sketchbook and showed the drawings she had made over the past weeks. I've been watching the star at night. The gas flows have been changing, building towards something, and now these pulses. They're connected. Professor Call moved through the crowd, crystalline body catching the red emergency lights. The Vortons studied Nira's sketches in silence. She may be correct, Call said finally. The intervals between pulses are not random. They follow a sequence that does not appear in any of our downloaded databases. Because it's not in your databases. Nira's fear was fading, replaced by certainty she couldn't explain. Something is inside that star. Something old. And it's trying to communicate. Admiral Sorrell's armored fist slammed against the nearest console. Impossible. We have studied this star for 3,000 years. Nothing lives inside it. Nothing you could download knowledge about. Nira held up her father's journal. But I found records in the archives. 2 million years ago, something called the Watcher was placed in this star. It observes civilizations, tests them, and the species that fail the test. She couldn't finish the sentence. They die. Professor Call completed. I have heard legends of the Watcher. I believe them to be mythology. The station shuddered as another energy pulse struck the shields. Warning lights flashed brighter. Shields at 60%. A technician called out. Admiral Sorrell turned to his officers. Begin evacuation procedures. All students to the transport bays. Wait. Nira stepped closer to the Admiral, ignoring the guards who moved to stop her. If we run, we fail the test. The Watcher isn't attacking us. It's asking us something. And we have to answer. Answer what? With what? The Admiral's voice dripped with contempt. Your human feelings? Your drawings? While this station burns around us, the pattern seekers thought like humans do. They failed the test and went extinct. But maybe they were close. Maybe we can succeed where they didn't. You're asking me to risk every life on this station based on your intuition. I'm asking you to consider that maybe intuition is exactly what the Watcher is looking for. The station shook again. Shields at 45%. Admiral Sorrel stared at the human girl who should never have been admitted to his academy. The girl who failed every exam. The girl with the empty datapad. You have 1 hour, he said finally. Then we evacuate, whether you have your answer or not. Nira nodded and ran for the communication array. Behind her, the star pulsed again, waiting for her response. Old books covered every surface of the archive room. Real paper, yellow with age. Scrolls made from materials that no longer existed. Physical records that most students had never touched because why would anyone read when they could download? Nira sat in the middle of this ancient knowledge, tears running down her face. Professor Call found her there, the crystalline being's light dimmed with concern. The Vorton moved carefully between the stacks of fragile documents. We have 43 minutes remaining, Call said. Why are you crying? Nira held up her father's journal. I finally understand what he was trying to tell me. Before he died, he knew something like this would happen eventually. Explain. The Watcher doesn't test knowledge. Nira wiped her eyes. It tests understanding. Every species that failed the test had downloaded their way to incredible intelligence. They knew everything, but they had forgotten how to think. Call's harmonics shifted to a lower frequency. Sadness, perhaps. The Vorton people adopted neural downloads 3,000 years ago. We believed it made us stronger. Smarter. Did it? The ancient professor was silent for a long moment. We used to compose music that made other species weep with its beauty. Now we produce efficient sound patterns. We used to debate philosophy for centuries. Now we simply download the accepted conclusions. That's what the Watcher is looking for. Nira stood, clutching her father's words against her chest. Not facts, not data, something alive, something that grows and changes and surprises. But what do we transmit? What is the answer it wants? I don't think there is a specific answer. I think we have to show it that we can still create answers, that we haven't forgotten how. They returned to the assembly hall together. Admiral Sorrel was coordinating evacuation procedures, his massive form directing traffic with military precision. Students filed toward transport bays in orderly lines. Admiral, Nira stepped into his path. I need access to the central communication array. Your hour is not finished. You have 37 minutes. I need to transmit to the Watcher. Not data, something else. Transmit what? Nira took a deep breath. Stories, music, art, the things we carry that cannot be reduced to downloads. I want to show the Watcher that some of us still remember how to create. Admiral Sorrel's armored face twisted with disbelief. You want to send children's tales to an ancient being that could destroy us all. I want to send proof that we're still alive. Really alive. Not just processing information. This is absurd. I am ordering immediate evacuation. Admiral, Professor Call stepped forward, crystalline form chiming with urgency. I have served this station for 400 years. In all that time, I have never seen anyone identify a threat that our downloads missed. This human did. Perhaps we should listen to her again. Then push through the crowd, for arms gesturing wildly. She's right. I've been thinking about it. All our downloaded knowledge, all our stored information, and none of it tells us what to do now. Because this situation requires something we deleted from ourselves. Other students began to murmur. Some nodded. Others looked uncertain. You're asking me to gamble with everyone's lives? Admiral Sorrel said. No. Nira met his eyes without flinching. I'm asking you to let us try being alive instead of just efficient. The station shook. Shields at 30% now. 29 minutes, the Admiral said. If your transmission fails, we evacuate. No arguments. Nira ran for the communication array. The room was built for sending data across light years. Massive screens displayed transmission protocols and relay coordinates. Everything was designed for efficiency. Nira ignored all of it. She opened her father's journal to a page filled with his handwriting. Not facts or figures. Just words about watching his daughter chase butterflies on Lego's colony. Words about the way sunset looked through the colony dome. Words about love and wonder and the small moments that made life worth living. She began to type, Professor Call arrived and added something of their own. An ancient Vorton song from before the downloads. The melody had no mathematical purpose. It simply existed because it was beautiful. Din came next, offering Silkari dream patterns that their people hadn't shared in generations. Images that meant nothing logically, but everything emotionally. Point one by one, students entered the array chamber. Each brought something their species had stopped valuing. Paintings, poems, games children used to play, recipes for food that nobody cooked anymore, useless things, precious things, human things, even when they came from beings who weren't human at all. Nero wove them together into a single transmission and aimed it at the dying star. "Here we are," she whispered as she pressed the send command. Still wondering, still creating, still alive. The transmission burst into space, and the star went silent. Silence pressed against the station like a hell breath. Every screen showed the same thing. The star had stopped pulsing. No energy bursts. Nora the Eschenespicus. Just orange light burning steady and calm. Nira stood alone in the communication array, her hands still touching the transmission console. Through the viewport, the star looked almost peaceful now. Almost sleeping. Did it work? Din asked from the doorway. "I don't know. Maybe it's thinking, processing what we sent." Admiral Sorrell's voice crackled through the speakers. "Shields stabilizing at 28%. The assault has stopped." "What did you do?" Before Nira could answer, something happened that had never happened before in the station's 3,000-year history. The star spoke. Not through energy pulses. Not through radiation patterns. The voice came directly into their minds, into every mind on the station, bypassing neural implants entirely. Old beyond measure. Patient beyond understanding. "You remember." Nira gasped. The voice felt like standing at the edge of an ocean during a storm. Enormous and ancient and utterly inhuman. "I have watched for 2 million years. Civilizations rise. They learn. They grow efficient. They download and store and optimize until nothing new remains. They become libraries instead of living things." Images flooded Nira's mind. Thousands of species, each more advanced than the last. Building incredible technologies. Conquering disease and death. Achieving perfection, then stagnating, then dying. The pattern seekers came closest, the watcher continued. They understood that knowledge without wonder is merely data. But when I tested them, they could not create. They had forgotten how. They could only remember the creations of their ancestors. What happened to them? Nira asked aloud. They chose extinction rather than live as empty vessels. A noble choice, perhaps, but wasteful. The star pulsed once, gently, and Nira understood it was a gesture of sadness. Then humans emerged, a young species, technologically primitive, unable to download information directly into their minds. "Many of my observers thought you were a mistake of evolution, a dead end. But you didn't," Nira said. "I watched you struggle to learn things that other species absorbed in seconds. I watched you fail and try again. I watched you create art that served no purpose except to express what you felt inside. And I wondered if you were what I had been searching for." Admiral Sorrell's voice came through the speakers again, stripped of its usual authority. "What are you? Why are you testing us?" "I'm a guardian. The last project of a species so ancient that even their name has been forgotten. They created me to preserve life in this galaxy. Not just biological life, but the creative spark that makes life worth preserving." "And the tests?" Professor Call asked. "Every civilization that reaches this station has achieved great things. But achievement is not enough. Without the ability to create new ideas, new beauty, new meaning, a species becomes a monument to its own past. Impressive, but dead." The star pulsed again, and this time Nira felt warmth instead of pressure. "Your transmission contains something I have not received in 2 million years. Not just knowledge, not just information, but living thought, wonder, the joy of creating something that has never existed before." Nira looked at the students gathered in the corridor outside the array chamber. Din with the dream patterns. Professor Call with the ancient song. All of them, standing together, having remembered something precious. You pass, the watcher said, not because of your technology or your efficiency, but because a human girl who cannot download anything taught an entire station to think again. What happens now? Nira asked. Now you go forward, create, wonder, make mistakes, and learn from them. And when other species visit this station, teach them what you taught yourselves today. The presence began to fade from their minds, but the Watcher spoke once more. The pattern seekers would have been proud of you, Nira Alconquo. Your father was right. The greatest wisdom cannot be given. It must be grown. Then the voice was gone. The star returned to its slow, peaceful burning. The shields began regenerating. Students looked at each other with new eyes, as if seeing their classmates for the first time. Admiral Sorrel appeared in the doorway. The massive Greth stood motionless for a moment, then did something no one had ever seen him do. He bowed to Nira. I was wrong about humans, he said. I was wrong about many things. Nira shook her head. You weren't wrong about efficiency in knowledge. Those things matter, but they're not the only things that matter. She held up her father's journal, worn and battered and filled with impractical words. This matters too. Professor Call's harmonics rang with something like laughter. I believe the academy curriculum requires significant revision. Starting tomorrow, Dan asked hopefully. Starting now. The crystalline being looked at Nira with 600 years of wisdom and something new. Something like hope. Would you help me design it? Nira smiled. I'd be honored. Outside, the dying star burned on. Patient, watching, waiting for the next species to arrive, hoping they would remember how to wonder. 3 months had changed everything and nothing at all. The lecture hall looked the same as always. Curved rows of seats facing a holographic display area. Soft lighting that adjusted to each species' visual needs. The ancient walls of Station Veridon holding back the void of space. But the students were different now. Nira sat in her usual seat in the back row. Her data pad was still blank. It would always be blank. But now, looking around the room, she noticed something remarkable. Other data pads were blank too. Not all of them. Not even most. But here and there, students had set aside their neural downloads to try something new. A Greth in the front row was sketching with a stylus. A pair of Silcari twins were passing handwritten notes back and forth. Even Professor Call had started lecturing differently, asking questions instead of simply transmitting answers. The new curriculum begins today, the crystalline professor announced. Organic cognition and creative synthesis. A course designed by your fellow student, Nira Okonkwo. Nira stood and walked to the front of the room. A year ago, she would have been terrified. Now she felt calm. This class won't give you any downloadable knowledge, she began. There's no data to absorb, no files to store. Instead, we're going to practice thinking. A Vorton student raised a crystalline hand. How do we practice thinking? Isn't that like practicing breathing? Try holding your breath for an hour. Then tell me breathing doesn't require practice. Nira smiled. Thinking is the same. Real thinking. Not just retrieving information, but creating new connections. Seeing patterns that nobody has seen before. She held up her father's journal. My father wrote this by hand over 30 years. Every observation, every question, every moment of wonder. He could have recorded it all digitally. It would have been faster, more efficient. But writing it by hand forced him to think about what he was putting on the page, to feel the weight of each word. Dan sat in the front row, all 4 hands clutching a small notebook. The Silcari had become Nira's first real friend on the station. Their journals were terrible. Messy handwriting, crossed out words. Drawings that looked like they were made by a child. They were beautiful. Today's exercise is simple, Nira continued. I'm going to show you an image. Not a star map or a navigation chart. Just an image. And I want you to tell me what it makes you feel. She activated the holographic display. The image was a photograph her father had taken on Lego's colony. A sunset through the dome, orange and purple lights streaming through the artificial sky. Silence filled the room. Well, Nira asked that a young Greth raise an armored hand. I don't have a word for it. Sadness mixed with beauty. That's called bittersweet, Nira said. Keep going. The colors remind me of my home, world's lava flows. before we industrialized. The Greth's voice softened. I've never been there, but seeing this image makes me want to visit. Other students began sharing. A Silkari talked about the way the light seemed to move like water frozen in time. A Vorton described the harmonics they imagined the sunset would produce if it could sing. For an hour, no one downloaded anything. No one accessed stored data. They simply looked and felt and wondered. After class, Admiral Sorrel was waiting in the corridor. The massive station commander had changed over the past months. He still carried himself with military precision, but his eyes had softened. The council has reached a decision, he said. Human admission to the academy is no longer provisional. Your species has earned full membership. Thank you, Admiral. Don't thank me. Thank the Watcher. And thank yourself. He paused, struggling with words that didn't come naturally to a soldier. I've started keeping a journal, writing by hand. It's difficult. It gets easier. Does it get better? Nira thought about her father, about all the pages he had filled with wonder and questions and love. It gets more valuable. That evening, Nira walked to the station's memorial garden, a small space filled with plants from 100 worlds dedicated to species that had not survived their own advancement. She had added something new last month. A small carving her father had made. A bird in flight, wings spread, reaching for something it would never catch. For you, she whispered to the extinct pattern seekers. You almost made it. You showed us the way. A sound made her turn. A young human stood at the garden's entrance. Barely 16, with wide eyes and trembling hands. A new arrival, probably just off the transport from Earth. Are you Nira Okonkwo? The young human asked. They said I should find you. Nira walked toward the newcomer. Welcome to Station Veridon. What's your name? Kemi. I am scared. Everyone here is so much smarter than me. They can download entire libraries in seconds. And I can barely remember what I had for breakfast. Nira put a hand on Kemi's shoulder. Don't worry about the downloads. They'll show you the easy answers, the ones everyone already knows. She pulled out her blank datapad and showed it to the young human. See this? Empty. It's been empty since I arrived. And I'm still here, still learning, still growing. How? Nira smiled and handed Kemi her father's journal. The most important lessons can't be given. They have to be grown, like seeds, like wonder, like everything that makes us human. Kemi looked down at the worn leather cover, then back up at Nira. Slowly, a smile spread across the young human's face. When do we start? We already have. Behind them, through the memorial garden's viewport, the dying star burned on. The Watcher slept within it, dreaming of civilizations yet to come. Patient, hopeful, waiting for the next species to remember how to wonder, and knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, humans were teaching them how.